Hi, I'm Campbell Addy. I'm a South London-based photographer and artist.
Hi, I'm James Corbin and I'm a model.
Hi, I'm Tolu Coker. I'm a fashion designer and multidisciplinary artist.
So we're here today to talk about how does cultural identity affect the image makers of today. So obviously I'm a photographer, I'm also a publisher. I've also done films, so I think like a multi-hyphenate, I think we all are. And I say everything in my work is layered. Everything in my work talks about where I'm from, like whether it's from Ghana, South London, my queer identity, but mainly it's my memories, I think. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think for me it's similar. I think the element of it being really layered is a huge thing. I think identity is so fluid. I know that's such a used word, but I think it is, especially as, like children of the diaspora. I think there's so many layers to it. And so many different influences too. I think today the influences aren't as perhaps traditional or typical, and they feel a lot more personal. And so, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I'd say, well, before being a model, I was a consumer of fashion. So to see like my culture in fashion and like seeing a story told through imagery, it felt included, And so that's something that I think I started to see more happen in like the 2010s, properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know you talked about like the fluidity of it. And I think for me, like I always call myself a Venn diagram and I'm the space in the middle. So when I did my show, I Love Campbell, last summer, it was like, okay, you're gonna do a solo shoot, what do you wanna do? And I was like, well, it's gonna be the most vulnerable, almost going back to the roots of it. So I spoke about my religious upbringing. So a lot of the images in my work were infused and regurgitations or reimaginations, I might say, of my own stories, reimaginations of my own stories. And we had this book called My Book of Bible Stories that if anyone wants Jehovah's Witness, don't know what that is. And it's basically like dumbing down of culture, biblical stories. So I laid that within my work, but then also it's something I ran away from a lot because it is still a cultural essence of me because it's my beginnings. And then I infused that with obviously my beginnings as a painter and as an artist, because even though photography is my main medium, a lot of the things I do, I draw. So that's kind of how I think my fluidity works. And then there's videography and then writings as well. But I think most of it comes from a place of problem solving. I think a lot of people who come from fluid backgrounds, we're often unsure of how to tap into it. Are we allowed to? Especially if those backgrounds are traumatizing. So we're kind of like, ugh. So for me, I Love Campbell was like, we're gonna love everything because it made me who I am, regardless of whether it was a negative or a positive. And it kind of neutralizes it. So yeah, how does your fluidity work?
Yeah, no, that's really real, because I was thinking that when I think of like identity and just like my process of creation, it's incredibly vulnerable. And I think I'm still reconciling with myself through my process. So I think it's both very vulnerable in that I interact with a lot of different people and a lot of different communities. But yeah, I'm also really discovering different parts of myself that I didn't recognize existed, or I didn't view in that way because I wasn't placed in a particular position. Like one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is just, what I always think about is the notion of blackness and like, what is my blackness, and things like, we say back home. I was born in London, but even that notion of like back home, having a sense of belonging. But it's like in Nigeria where my parents were born, like everyone's black. So like no one's black, you're human. And so it's like my identity in that space is really different because there's a sense of belonging, but there's also still a sense of otherness, but it's a very different otherness to that which I might feel in Britain.
How do you cope with that? Like, how does that manifest, though, the otherness in black spaces, like black countries?
Like, I'm quite fascinated by it. I think it really, again, I think that's the thing, the part where I was saying a lot of it is like a reconciling with self. It's about, you know, discovering who I am in this space or in this identity. Like that environment presents a different range of perhaps challenges, but also privileges to what it might be like, you know, growing up and living in the UK. And then also like in the US, like being around like African Americans and like Black Americans, like being a Black Brit, it's completely different. And so it's also, for me, it's really like sparks this passion to want to be able to tell our stories with more dignity, because I think that difference is dignity, like to be able to recognize that it's not homogenous, like and I think that's the fluidity that I kind of talk about, is actually there's so much difference even within that notion of like Blackness and what it is to be Black.
I think like as like a model that has to be in front of the camera and share myself, I learn a lot. And like I feel like when I started modeling, I only started to realize like issues that I had with my dark skin, and like issues that a lot of Black Brits had within our own communities when it came to skin color. Like I tried to bleach my skin when I was younger. Like I remember like when I was in secondary school, I was so used to, I don't know if you guys know the term blick, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right. I don't know if you guys, but yeah, the term blick, like my friend was just like to me, you know, like James, like you'd be so paying if you were just like were a bit lighter. And I just remember that same day, I don't know, I got off the bus in Brixton. I went to like, you know, the cosmetic store, Pax, and I picked up the bleach and I tried to bleach my skin, like just like that. And I only really, the reason I bring that up is because I only really started to understand how powerful it was to have my dark skin in imagery, in fashion particularly, and to be included, because many people are seeing themselves, and that's their reason to feel validated and see themselves.
Because it's weird, because I remember seeing your picture.
Let's get into that.
I was doing casting, and I do this weird thing where I have like tabs and little folders where I just keep people, and I'm like, they're fab, but I'm gonna find the right project for them. Hopefully they want to work with me. And it was your skin, and it wasn't because of a fetishization. It wasn't because of your size, because like you remind me of my family. So I remember seeing a picture and going, wow. And I also thought you were so pretty. I was like, is this a girl? I was like, such a beautiful face.
I do.
And it like shocks me to hear this, because like maybe obviously because I'm African and I'm used to seeing different shades of Black. But I remember it was so like, oh, James is fab, beautiful, skin is fab. And I think it was like a year. Like I remember just having your name on the board for like a year. And then we shot for Italian Vogue in 2020. And it's like one of my favorite pictures of all time. And like to me, it's like all the things that necessarily you weren't championed for as a child are the things that I'm like, oh, this is fab. And like, don't change it. Like, just be who you want to be. And I think as cultural image makers or our identity, it's like 20 years ago, would I have said that? Because would the culture be different? Because I think our generation very much aware of what's been and what we didn't have access to, and we've kind of made our own little real estate, our own little island to create stuff on, and now we're bridging, you know, from the island to the mainland of like cultural work. And I think for imagery, for me it's important to see my family in my images. So championing people like you, people like us, whether it's from design, whether it's from, I don't know, it just makes sense to me. It didn't make, like, I don't remember when I was at uni, it was just what we did. And then the articles and oh my God, you're championing this. I'm like, well, yes, but also it's my day-to-day.
Yeah.
I look in the mirror every day, I see a dark-skinned man. I think it makes sense to take pictures of dark-skinned men. But then hearing what you said, James, about the importance of it in imagery, I think now, just looking back, I'm like, for me, it's just like 1, 2, 3. But then, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, he's nice, take a picture, but then there's more weight to it.
I don't know if you remember, always like when people ask me about like how modeling. I wasn't a model when you had approached me. No.
Oh.
I wasn't a model. I was like in a Star Now thing there. They were paying somebody £20.
Yes, Star Now. I remember those things.
I was in I got cast in a Star Now thing to just make a quick money to like do a testing shoot. I wasn't in front of the camera.
You're very easy
With
to
Benjamin Hampson.
Yes, that was a picture of Benjamin Hampson.
Yes.
And I remember you were there like, it was like blue, black, red. And the way you just looked into the camera, I was like, because when you came on set, you were so smooth. So I didn't know I just assumed you'd been doing this for a while.
I was bricking it. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought when I got the message, I thought it was to help on set.
Oh, no.
As production.
I didn't know this.
Like, didn't believe that you really need my image. I didn't feel I was meant to be there. And like you said, I don't know what happened when I stepped in front of the camera on set, but it felt like home. And
you just felt very vulnerable to me. Maybe it was your nerves. I don't know.
I didn't like even take off. Like, I remember I was shirtless in the picture, and I've never taken my top off even in school. Like in the PE changing rooms.
So why did you for me?
I don't know. I don't know.
Was that like a defining moment for you then?
Absolutely, because I didn't tell anybody. I didn't think it was real. I thought it'd be embarrassing to say out loud because I didn't see people would see me as somebody who deserves to be shot in front of a camera.
Okay.
And a lot of what I did before that was about boosting others behind the camera. I'm a TV producer as well. And yeah, I was like, I would like to see other people and not myself. So this is a whole other side of things, and I've learned a lot about myself, and that's why I have to use my platform and talk about it very candidly. And so, yeah, that's the start of my journey. Yeah.
Heard it here first.
The exclusive. But you said something that, like, I think just really, like, touched something for me, which is, like, the importance of being seen. And I think one of the things I think so much about just, like, our stories is that so many of them, because of, you know, our kind of, like, collective and individual histories, they exist within the oral sphere. So I think there's a real intergenerational part of also, like, being seen. Like, I was on the other side of the kind of colorism conversation where
Let's talk about it.
I'm fairer in complexion, and so for me a lot of the time it was kind of like, you know, oh, you're mixed. But then we had this conversation earlier where I was saying, like, on my dad's side of the family, they're much darker in complexion, and so in some instances growing up, I recognized that I would be lauded or praised for fairer skin, but I didn't really understand it. But I also felt like, oh, I wanted to look like the rest of my family. I saw it as something that was really beautiful. But I think that for me, that was a specific privilege that I had because, like, my father was a photographer, and his whole life was about documenting our stories. And so that was something which was passed down. And I didn't really recognize that there was a lack of that until I entered, like, different spaces. So, like, I went to boarding school in West Sussex, but I grew up on a council estate. So being around people from, like, complete other walks of life and literally growing up with them, that's when you start to realize, like, oh, like, I didn't realize I was poor growing up. I know it might sound crazy, but it's because it was a different currency. So it was like a wealth of love. It was a wealth of community where I grew up. Everyone knew everyone's sort of parents and families, and, like, photo albums always feature really heavily in my work. Like, I always start off looking at actual people's photo albums, usually my dad's, and then finding the people in it and then trying to find their grandparents and piece together, like, the different stories, even people who've, like, passed. And you realize how many alternative versions of history or our stories that exist, but they're all oral. And I think there's a huge intergenerational part where it's like you have to have conversations with the generation before, because some things aren't documented in books the same way that perhaps, you know, you can go to the library and pick that up. It might be in someone's journal, it might be in someone's photo album. We have different ways, it might be in fabric, we have different ways of commemorating, like, these memories or these moments. And so that's something that I've found is really powerful, is that actually sometimes we haven't been seen. I think for those of us who've grown up in the West and have a sense of belonging to somewhere else, being seen for us, we're in spaces where we weren't really recognized in that way. But within our own cultures and communities, I think that we have seen ourselves and documented ourselves. Perhaps we just haven't valued it in the same way.
I want to touch on like the feeling seen aspect, because like you looking at your family photos, feeling seen is like a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? Because in one space you just kind of want to go about your life. You just want to be normalised. The mundane is the sweet spot, I say, because it's like I just want to be here. But then you also understand not necessarily the power, but the essence of what it means to be of another culture, or multiple cultures, and creating, especially when they're minorities. And last autumn, I was able to go to Theaster Gates's Black Artist Retreat. And like talking about the Black Archive, I didn't realise how imperative it is. Like you say, a lot of things are oral, like my family history is oral. There's no written down document. And as I started photography, I was very shy about being seen. So I remember like going out, we were just clubbing, like I remember going to Loverboy, PDA, and I would just take a camera because I didn't know how to talk to people. But I felt confidence in documenting people and culture. But then only, I would say, in the last 4 years, meeting people like James Bonner and Fiesta Gates and just seeing the extended versions of Black Archive, it's imperative that we're also documented. Because I think we live in a social media age and we're seen, but like feeling seen and then being documented, for me, two different things, because there'll come a time, our time will pass, and you don't want a baby Tolu in like 2084 to be going through just an album. I want to be able to find you in a museum. I want to be able to find you in a library. I want to be able to find you on, shows. I want to be able to be like, this is Tolu, but this is also her work, because I think we're all separate from it. And it's something that I'm still battling with, like being awarded things and going spaces and people. It's very weird being hyper-visual, because where we grew up in the West, it's like you can spot us in fashion, you can spot us in spaces. So it's this weird, it's nice, but it's also like, okay, the good fight will be won one day when they look back in thousands of years. It'll just be, oh, remember those times? There's only like one or two of them. That's kind of how, it's weird. Feeling seen is great, but I don't know, I'm not a model. So that's another, like, I don't know, how does that feel for you? Because you're literally seen to work. Like, you have to be seen to work. Or not seen, you have to be, I don't know the word, you know what I mean?
I think I see the bigger picture, and that helps me with early in the days, that would help me with my nerves. Like when sometimes I will go on a set with a lot of people behind the camera and I still want to be as vulnerable as I was the first time I was in front of the camera. And like I get so many messages from people and what they feel from images they see of me. And I feel that empowers me. That definitely empowers me. And I realize it's a lot more than just fashion, than clothes, than beautiful people. It's all about people being able to feel their culture, be able to see that they can creatively like expand, and it's okay. Like you said, there's no, like, we want to be past the place, so it's only one or two, and that it's just normal. And of course, like in a subdivision, I'm also a plus size male. And like, this is all very new, I don't know if that even crossed your mind when you was making a shoot.
100%. Yeah, because I come from a chubby family. I'm a thick boy. And it's like, I know it's like to not be able to fit samples. And that whole thing was about love. So I was just like, I love people. I love all shapes and sizes. I just got very diverse. So coming out of where I grew up was shocking. Like you say, I was like, oh, there isn't fat people everywhere, or there isn't like dark-skinned people, or even just like in terms of photography, I find people of difference are fetishized. So I was like, I wouldn't do like an all big, like, I just try and make it normal. Like, again, the mundane is where I'm trying to aim, where it doesn't look like, wow, just like, oh, beautiful picture, That's kind of how I think.
Yeah, it's opened that door. And I realize that's another thing I've got to advocate for. Like, the more I saw there's a space in fashion that's not been filled yet, and there's not been like plus size, bigger males in high fashion particularly. Also, I want the door to remain open. I want to do as many things as a model can do, you know, and we're ongoing in the journey. We're ongoing, and there's so many new age designers that take into consideration diversity and genuinely wants to see their clothes on other different types of bodies, full stop. And I just always want to make sure I'm pushing that message of love, you know? And so I'm navigating it as we go along, you know, and I'm just being honest, you know?
Yeah, I love what you said about the mundane, because I think that's definitely, I wouldn't say a place that I aim. I think you just operate from the space of who you are and what is. And definitely like the Johnson Publishing Archives.
Crazy.
Insane.
Everybody should go to Chicago if you can.
Yeah, South Side.
Oh my God, it was the most, like, the geek in me. I felt like I was 15 again in my local library.
Yeah.
And it's just, but then everything's black. And like, but not the version of black that I know, because I'm not African American.
Right.
So to me, it was just like, and also they were so free with it. Like, they weren't like glass walls. They weren't like, you can't touch this. And like the ADHD in me was like, I'm gonna touch every single thing and take. But it's like, and they say come, like they're very open, so if you can. But seeing that made me realize we need to document more, because where's the Black British Archive?
Right. And I think that's the part of where it's also like a reconciliation with self, where you go out and you see these different forms of documentation, or these different cultures and identities that are existing, like the Johnson Publishing Archives and like just the Astor's Archive is very moving, because it reminded me of like Drum magazine and like Ovation magazine. And I was like, oh wait, I do remember seeing things like this, like, but that was like, I guess the peak of that was probably like in the 70s, you know? And so you obviously pointed on something really, really heavy, which is about also the importance of documenting the now through so many different spheres too, because there is like, even with those images, there's also the sounds that accompanied the time. There was like the club culture, there was the church culture that accompanied it. And so it was a whole culture and community that existed in that time that is documented through image, but also through so many different mediums. And so, yeah, that was definitely, for me, a really special place and, yeah, time to visit Chicago. I would say with like the work I'm doing now, one of the biggest things is about the different universes that exist around, I guess, the image. Again, like working with models to, I think one of the funny things is obviously people see collections and they see the clothes, and this might sound a bit like weird to say, I think I care less about the clothes than what the clothes represent. So for me, like clothes are like a form of artifact. Like I think like the smell, the texture, the memories that are attached to them. And the fact like this element of having something that's so unique and in some ways, I guess, bespoke is really special. That's a cultural thing too. Like it's very common or was very common back in the day that regardless of whatever walk of life you're from, like everyone would know a tailor or someone, and even if it's that they had that one coat or one jacket, it was made and so it was loved and cherished in a particular way, and there are so many things attached to that garment, so it now has this other value that's outside of kind of like, I guess, the trend or the style or perhaps some of the things that we might be more vocal with in terms of fashion today. So yeah, I would say that's something I'm definitely really tapped into, is about how it makes you feel. And I think when people are able to connect to it in that way, I think it's much more empowering.
I've not thought about my work like that, you know? You've kind of made me go, because like, I always think about how it's viewed. Obviously it's a picture or I don't make products, I would say. But like the next couple of things I'm working on are quite product-led, so people have to take something away. But I've not thought about like the little pockets of ourselves that we attribute to physical things and objects. But like, That's interesting. So I wonder, how do I make pictures or films or that doesn't worry about the visual but more the feeling? Like, you know, it's a bit like with music. You know, how does it make you feel? But now we're in the world of like music videos and all that stuff, but like, how does a song make you feel? I wonder if I can apply that to my photography. So I'm thinking out loud here.
That's real stuff.
But no, it's hard. What am I working on now? I can't say what I'm working on, but I can kind of say what I'm working on. But you've like, I wish I had a pen and paper to like write my ideas. I'm doing like another publication, let's call it. And in the opposite to you, where you're about the feeling, I was really nervous. I felt the last 4 years I had so much pressure to create this succinct, amazing thing, let's call it. And then I kind of like, the last 6 months, I just kind of went outside of my usual boundaries. I've like traveled more, I've like slept more. And I was like, do you know what? If I just document whatever's happening now, it may not be a blockbuster hit, but it could be a cult classic. You know, that's kind of how, you know, to shift my paradigm, like, because there's so much pressure, I think, for us youngsters, because you're the first to do it in your family, or the first to do it in your town, and then you do your first thing just because you need to get it out. Almost like if you don't, you'll be, you know, it's like it's word vomit, but visual vomit. And then now you're like, okay, now you've got a name and you got this. And so you have to kind of try. So all that pressure got to me. And now I'm kind of just like, I'm just going to document what I see and I know. And then hopefully it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, there's still a publication that someone can collect from my studio in like 10 years. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, is that vague? Did that make sense? What
Yeah,
I said? Okay.
that-
What are you working on, James?
So I recently like delved into the world of the creative. Like, I'm always like shopping around for designers that like make things that I can wear and that is fashion as well. And I did like my first ever like creative directing story last year with Metal magazine.
Oh yes, I remember.
Yeah,
That's
they gave me like a cover story as well.
I remember that.
And I remember the Metal team came to me and they were like, look, we want to do this cover story with you, a 13-page story for the magazine, but we just don't know what to put you in. But we see that you find stuff and you wear it and you go there and it's designers. Would you be interested in jumping on this and helping the creative? And I was like, yes. Because I feel as much as I'm a model, as I'm trying to evoke change in the industry, I've got to utilize all the skills that have come together, you know. So I feel like whenever I do step out, I see it just as important as a job because I realize I've got to show people this is possible. A lot of brands don't do diverse campaigns because they don't see it as marketable, as sellable, and I feel I try my best to show people in my real day-to-day and through my work. And yeah, I was able to like pull all these, help the fashion editor pull all these bits together. We made some amazing work, and then not long after that, I did a project with Hunger magazine as well, where I had a second opportunity to creative direct. So now I think I'm doing more of that as well. And I think helping out brands who want to be diverse and do it the right way, where it doesn't look so abrupt and ungenuine, or not genuine, not authentic.
Yeah.
Because I believe this all can be authentic. I feel like on the runway, in editorials, when you open your magazines, seeing different bodies is fashion. It doesn't take away from anything. It doesn't cheapen anything. It is marketable, you know. There's like an empty market there of bigger men, bigger women, bigger people who want to take part in high fashion, luxury fashion. And that's what I'm trying to show through creatively.
Would you make a brand?
I would eventually, you know.
Yeah, I was like,
I'm just like, I'm waiting for the plug. I'm waiting for the plug.
Yeah, I'd love to collaborate with a brand or something like that, or like do like a, you know, something like that.
I can see it. Like every time I see it, I'm like, what are you wearing? Like today I was like,
yeah,
who's this
so I was like,
guy?
what's this?
Thank you.
No.
It means I'm doing something. I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm happy.
No, definitely.
What projects have you been working on?
I'm preparing for my second show with New Gen, which is, it's funny. Campbell talked about like pressure, and I'm like, it's so funny because I think a lot of the pressure, if I'm honest, is probably the pressure I put on myself as well. Because there is the external like expectation, but I think it's such an expectation that I put on myself because I recognize like the importance and the privilege of certain opportunities. Because I'm also surrounded by so much greatness, like so many talented like friends, and you just realize that certain platforms, it's like you're being handed a mic. And I think, I don't know whether this is something you might relate to or not, but for me, sometimes I often feel like just my being or the presence of me as a woman or as a Black woman, it's like you don't just represent yourself, it's like you're representing an entire community, which, if I'm honest, I don't think is particularly accurate at all. But I do think it's like an external expectation that is set, and in knowing that, I then put a pressure on myself to want to do the best justice I can.
Make everyone proud.
Yeah.
Who's everyone?
Right. No, but for
Who's
real.
everyone?
And I think
And
that's...
how can you?
You can't.
How would that be possible?
And I think that's... So my words for like the last 2 years has been autonomy, and just realizing actually like that's one of the most powerful things in just what I'm creating, the stories I'm documenting, the way I'm documenting it. There will be so much crossover with different people from so many different communities, but it will always be authentically mine because it's through my lens. And I think that having that autonomy is something which is so empowering, and I kind of want, not just for myself, but for everyone else around me. Like, I think that's really special.
I have a question for you both. What obstacles have you guys faced, like, to being where you are today? I'm really interested in aspects as a designer, aspects as a photographer, because as a consumer, I don't know. I wouldn't see this. I would love to know, especially as a Black photographer, as a Black designer.
Like the first thing that comes to my head is myself. I think my biggest obstacle has been my mental health, and just being able to be alone in the stillness of life. Because I hate being idle. And, the mind is a powerful, powerful tool. And depending on how it's tuned or how it's raised or how it's groomed, it can be at your detriment. So for me, despite all the things I was doing, I couldn't see them. Like, I genuinely couldn't see, like, myself. What am I doing? Like, the work. I couldn't accept praise. I was often very paranoid despite doing those things. So I really had to, like, in 2020, like, despite such issues that were going on, I really had to sit myself down and go, okay, do you know what? You need to sort this out, because I'm blocking my own blessings. I couldn't see my container. I couldn't see the future. It was very, wasn't beautiful. But then once you slowly overcome that, I realized that I've always been the person I've been. I've always got myself out of spaces. And like, it's kind of cute. It's like I look at my little self and it's like, yeah, we're killing it, So that's my biggest obstacle. And I think just because of my economical status growing up, how I grew up, where I grew up, also being queer, just a lot of layers of things. I was told I wasn't going to win, let alone survive. So the fact that I was just surviving, my mind was like, cool, everything else is fake, everything's a lie. Because, I should just be happy working a 9 to 5. Even, I remember getting a job in retail, in Topshop. And it's funny, like, I didn't realize how I was viewed by systems until something I didn't think was important was like goals for me. Like, I got a job at Topshop and I think I was like 19, and everyone's like, wow, that's amazing, like, you've made it. Oxford Circus.
I was there too?
Oh, SQ2. And it was weird because I remember, and it's those little knocks that got me, I think, because I remember being 19 and thinking this is just a little job I need to do to get to the next place, but everyone else viewed it as my goal. They're like, wow, you've made it. I'm like, made it? Like, no, I'm going to own this building. And they're like, really? And then like every university application was a no.
So do you think there's limitations that was like limitations that's placed onto you when people think they're even being positive by saying that to you?
At the time, I thought it was limitations. Now I'm older and I've experienced more. it circles back into this conversation of being seen. They didn't have a reference for who I am, but I had the reference because it's me. But to them, it's like, I know my container, but until I do it, you're not going to know. But being young and is it influential? No. When people could influence you, what's that? Impressionable.
Yeah.
I just assumed that's what they were saying, but they were just like, oh, no one's done that before, or we haven't seen this before. So they just couldn't even imagine, whereas my imagination's wild. In my head, I'm a Pokemon flying with gold leaves. So to them, it's like, oh, you're from here, you shouldn't. And it still happens today. But I think it was more so just the lack of reference. And it goes back to the Black Archive, it goes back to being seen. If there's more to be seen, then those comments from people won't disappear, they'll diminish. And then you'll be able to sift out who's being rude and who just doesn't know what else is out there.
And yourself, like, what obstacles do you feel that you faced as a designer?
Yeah,
as a Black woman?
Yeah, I think like you articulated probably what like my initial answer was like actually myself. But I would say that's on much more of a personal level, kind of, you know, what Campbell touched on about just like the mental, because I think there are the challenges which probably we've all faced that are external because of whether it's like, you know, your social status, your economic status, you know, your racial, cultural positionality. But I think the biggest thing is the way in which I internalized that in different ways growing up. And I think part of it for me was also navigating from a position of survival. So it's like living and like existing, trying to survive rather than like thriving. And I think a lot of that, you know, the personal part of it has been mental. And it's more so been navigating the environments that you're in, or like I love how you said the container and the reference point, because those are things I definitely have felt where it's within myself. It's like the sky's the limit, because like my idea of success, it's like I always say, all my friends that know me, I want to live on a farm. Like I love farm life. Like I'm not trying to be the most famous rich person at all. That's not my goal. But having like the freedom and autonomy to be able to do things and not have to worry in particular ways that perhaps I saw my parents have to worry or their parents have to worry. You can say breaking generational curses is what is like the common phrase. And I think that that's a big responsibility. So I think for me, that's been a big obstacle. I think professionally, I think it's been like the disparity between how I see myself versus perhaps how people see me. So for example, even designing, like I'm really specific in saying that I design like luxury fashion. But I think as a Black designer within a space, sometimes you can be seen as a Black designer and people already have an idea or notion of what you should be designing or what you're talking about or what they think you're talking about. And so again, it comes back to that thing of like autonomy. I think if I think about it, that's the thing I've kind of been fighting for throughout my whole life, is like having that autonomy to just be and just exist outside of the categorization or the label. And I think also transparently, like access to resources. I think it's that thing of, and I think it's also interlinked with that. It's what people see as valuable or worth investing in. And I think often, sometimes we experience individual shifts when there's like collective shifts. I think I've been really privileged with certain opportunities. And even still behind the scenes, there's so many things that like, I'm still, you know, trying to make it work, trying to figure it out as we go along. And so, yeah, I'll say like just resources, access to resources to be able to continue just doing what I'm doing. And what about you, James?
What have James Corbyn overcome in the last decade of being fab?
Self-confidence has been like a huge journey for me since the first time stepping in front of the camera. And I feel I've had to navigate that so publicly, because sometimes it's been faking, feeling confident to create the image, but not actually feeling confident, not feeling comfortable in my skin. Like, it was like, for me, I had to change my environment, even when I started modeling, because I would realize I would still allow maybe negative words to be said to me, like in my close environment, that would make me feel I'm still not meant to be here, even though I'm turning up to work and I'm representing all these people as I'm being told. So yeah, the changes within me, changing my environment and allowing people around me that pours love into me as I pour into them. And it reflected so much in the way that I was to showing up to work and being able to be vulnerable and enjoy the work as well. I would say professionally, I learned like I have to educate people as much as I'm educating myself, even creatives, even from agents to casting directors to designers, and it's all with love, I must say, like just in terms of language and sensitivity, you know, and I'm aware like I've got to face those block roads and have those situations so that it's better for the next person behind me. And yeah, like there's times where I've turned up to shows that I'm about to walk and the security's told me you're not allowed in, you're not a model. Like, you know, like it's changing, and I wouldn't class those as obstacles. I class them as like learning lessons, because yeah, I don't allow it to penetrate me because I've changed the way I see myself. So it started within changing the way I saw myself, where your body rejects anything that isn't what you are and what you know you are and what you're capable of and the reason why you're doing things. Yeah.
Cool, fam.